Hey guys, what's up? JC with Big Game Real Estate, and today we're talking who's the better tenant, commercial or residential? This is a question I get all the time from new investors. What type of building should be my first? What type of building should I own? Well, let's take a look at some pros and cons. Residential. What would be a pro of residential? Well, number one, acquisition cost, right? And when I say residential, guys, I don't mean multifamily buildings, I mean homes. So lower acquisition cost generally, and better loan programs for down payments. You can get into the property for a lot less on the total loan amount and a lot less on the down payment as well. You have 5 and 10% down payments for resi, and your minimum is 25 to 30 for commercial. Now, what about tenants? Okay. Well, on the residential side, we're going to have personal tenants. We're going to have families. Okay. We're probably doing 1 or 2 year leases, and we're just going based on a credit check, right? So if someone loses a job, they run out of money, you're only going to take their security deposit, which is anywhere 1 month to a month and a half. That's the risk that you run. Whereas on a commercial tenant, you're going to get a corporate or a personal guarantee, and they're going to show you what they have before you sign the lease. Generally, there's something, 1, 2, 3 year rolling guarantee or a full term guarantee. So you're guaranteed to get your money unless you have to go to court. So again, in my eyes, it's a more stable, commercial is a much more stable situation. And that applies to all commercial, office, industrial, residential being multifamily, and retail. Okay. What about your tenants? Well, if you're in a residential, let's say you have 4 units, let's say you have, 4 units, whatever. You could have up to 15, 20 people in that residential home. Again, you're worrying about neighbors bothering each other. You have friends over. It becomes a lot of management. Whereas, yes, a commercial tenant may have customers, they may have employees, but they're there in a professional sense. You're not dealing with personal issues. From a money standpoint, what about increases? Well, residential, sometimes it's tough to raise the rent. That we like to say that we would do it every year. But if you're dealing with, let's say, a 4 unit and you got somebody who maybe lost their job, maybe they're on hard times, you're faced with, well, do I lose this tenant and lose maybe a month or two of rent? Or do I just not make the extra 50 or $60 and keep them? So you don't really always have the opportunity to raise the rent all the time. Whereas in a commercial tenant, you're on a longer lease term, and the increases are already baked into the lease. So they know every year they're going to get a 2 or a 3 or 4% increase, hands down every year. All right. So again, more stable. When it comes to the bank, okay, when you need to borrow money against the property in a residential home, you only got year leases. There's no guarantee you're going to have a tenant next year. In a commercial property, the bank can see the lease term. If you have 8 years left, that's a bankable lease. On top of the fact, if you have a large corporation in there, it's much easier to borrow money, and it also increases the property of the value. That's a good benefit in commercial, is a mom and pop tenant, mom and pop office, mom and pop retail. If you have a large corporation, it's much better for the value and much easier to take money out. When it comes to maintenance in commercial buildings, obviously, usually the tenant is always responsible for things inside of their space. A freestanding building, they take care of the entire property on a triple net lease. You're responsible for common areas in multi-tenant buildings, but you always have a company that's handling that. Residential, who are they calling? They're calling you, right? Remember, when I say residential, I'm not talking about a multi-family building with 100 tenants. Okay, I'm talking about a home. Who are they calling? Well, at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's only one person to call, and that's you. Okay, when the water main breaks or the water pipe or the toilet, you're running down there and doing the repairs. You're getting out of your day and making it happen, or you're trying to, find a handyman that does. All right. And what about the big question? How do I get my money? All right. Well, again, I'm just using a 4 unit multifamily as an example. So let's say the rent's due on the 1st. Okay, you go down there and 2 of the tenants got rent. Okay, now the other 2, one guy says he's going to pay you the following week. One guy says he needs to the following week. Yeah, you might make a couple extra bucks with a late fee, but you're going to be down at that property every Friday or Saturday night trying to collect the rent. It becomes a job. Well, what about a commercial tenant? Again, commercial tenants, those checks are coming from the business. I'm not going to say that they don't default on the rent, but it's a lot easier to go after your money and chase your money. Also, with commercial tenants, of course, residential, commercial, anybody can damage a property. I hope that never happens. It's a lot less likely with a commercial tenant. And with a commercial tenant, you're a lot more likely to see them improve your building. Again, if I have some vanilla box that's a retail box and I'm going to get a spa to come in, well, the spa is probably going to, they may or may not add value to the building, but they're going to make it new and modern. So if they leave, you're in a much, much better position. Residential, well, you have to paint after every tenant, but you have to upkeep your bathrooms, right? Think about a commercial building. If you have a 5,000 square foot space, what can you do to it? There's nothing to do. It's a 5,000 square foot space, right? You're going to paint the walls and, fix anything. In residential, every 10 years, you're going to have to upgrade those bathrooms. You're going to have to upgrade those kitchens for the next tenant. Things get dated. A commercial box, an industrial warehouse, there's things that break, but there's nothing that gets dated. So again, guys, those are just a couple of differences and tips between, do I go out and do I buy residential homes or do I buy a commercial building? And again, a commercial building, although generally higher, doesn't have to be a $10 million purchase. There's plenty of commercial buildings out there that you can get for a good cost, a good value. And again, another thing I just forgot to mention is, how about increasing the value? Well, in a residential home, there's only so much you can increase that value, right? In a commercial building, you can value add exponentially between not only improvements you make to the building, the type of tenant, and the rent roll of the tenant. So, all right, guys, that wraps it up for today. We'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.